Hello, students, and welcome to my screencast on evolution for the 2018 school year. I really hope you enjoyed this unit and that you can see how evolution accounts for the unity and diversity of life around us. How are we like the fish in our fish tank? Thank you, Omar and Ishmael, for bringing them in. How are we different? Why are there 8.7 million species on Earth? Why do we all have the same genetic code? This video is not meant for profit by me or by anybody else. That's what this license down here says. I use lots of images from Khan Academy and from HHMI, two free, fantastic websites. Highly recommend you check them out. And I've linked several activities and articles in Google Classroom for you. This video is long. Please feel free to skip over sections to just go to the points that you need. So here is my overarching notes for myself. I didn't make you write this down or anything. I put the slide over this, right? The screen, excuse me. So I'm asking myself, can I teach and answer these questions? And you should be able to do them too as a student, right? So what is evolution? What causes evolution? What evidence exists for evolution? Justified evidence. What changes in a population occur because of evolution? How does evolution explain the unity and diversity of life? And then how does species become separate? Those are all questions just kind of like recounting facts, etc. And then we took the answers from all these questions and we tried to make some more comparisons and some more critical thinking gestures as we talked about Addie's story with MRSA and with antibiotic resistance. All right, so I'm going to go through each of these questions in this video. That's what makes it a little long. Skip to the ones that you need help with. You can go to them and then you can review the study guide and the materials I have in Google Classroom for you. Good luck, and remember to enjoy the journey. It's not about the grade, it's about the learning that goes through it, and to provide examples. If you just memorize definitions, students, those won't be there with you when you take the exam in December, and they definitely won't be there with you later on in life when you're trying to talk about evolution. But if you can provide an illustrative example, like the MRSA example, the rock pocket mice, the ice fish, those things will stick with you. And that's what's pretty cool about biology. And then you can talk about them and you can have a great time. All right, so study with a friend, study by yourself, but be able to explain what's going on. Let's dive in. Okay, what is evolution? And can you provide an example of it? So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, the example we used in class that I started off this unit with is the HHMI movie on the rock pocket mice. We did a couple of things with HHMI. You got to hear a lot of Sean Carroll. And I think it's just really telling, right? You saw this and you saw the owl come in or the snakes and they were eating them, and it's the Snicker bars of the deserts. And you're like, oh no. So here in the light covered sand in the Southwest US, the light mice were great, right? But there's inherent variation within the population. There's different genes or different versions of genes, right? Called alleles. And so there are some dark mice. A lava flow happened, or the mice moved to an area that had a lava flow, and the ground was darker. So this is a pretty big selective pressure. And over time, it's selected for the dark mice. And I had you graph that out and make bar graphs and kind of compare and use data to justify and provide reasoning for the cause and effect of evolution. So here's just a piece from Khan Academy kind of going over it, the same thing, right? So there was diversity in the mice, there was variation. More are born than can survive, there's predation. The light ones get eaten, and the dark ones kind of proliferate. You were all very comfortable with that. We didn't play the game with those cool, what do you call them? Like fabrics, and we had different colored dots that we put on there, and we used our fingers to pick them up, and we looked at how the alleles or the dots changed over time. Here's just a couple of screenshots from the movie. If you just have a 1% advantage to being dark, over 1,000 years, right, in those reproductive events, the mice are going to be mostly dark. Pretty intense. But look, if you speed it up to a 10% advantage, which I think you could definitely see, it happens in just 1/10 of the time. In just 100 years it does. So in AP Bio, we do some spreadsheet analysis with this, with selection coefficients, etc. But for regular bio, you can just understand that if there's a strong selective pressure, the population evolved. Individuals didn't evolve, the population did. Here's some cool pictures of Darwin's tree of life. So you can think about the rock pocket mice Well, they wouldn't be different species, but they would be dark or light. And this could show speciation over time, or what can happen as the environment changes, right? The environment changes, you evolve. Those that are the fittest, the most likely to survive and reproduce, are able to pass on those traits. So I showed you this. This is a graphic I've used since 2004, my first year teaching. I just think it explains the theory of evolution by natural selection very well. So go ahead and pause the video. I meant to animate this, cover it up, right? Cover up the different pieces and see if you can explain it. What's going on here? So here's how I would explain it. Let me see if I can use my highlighter. So there'd be more there's more organisms here than can survive, right? There's lots that are produced. We saw that in your reading with Thomas Malthus with population. There's variation within them. You see some have antlers, some are light, some are dark. They have many characteristics that differ. Some of those characteristics make them more fit in the environment. That can change as the environment changes. But here, the dark ones are more fit for this environment. The light ones they either get sick or they get eaten or predated. That adaptation of the dark fur color spreads throughout the population. So if my talking about the rock pocket mice kind of threw you off, if I use too many vocab terms, you should be able to explain this one. Overproduction, variation, selection, adaptation, right? Evolution has occurred because there's been a change in that initial population. There's more dark elk now than there were light ones. Okay. So ultimately, it comes back to a change in the gene pool. We haven't gone over genetics. This is the first year that I've taught evolution before genetics, so we will. But changes in the genes are reflected in the phenotypes or the physical traits that you see. Here's a good example from Khan Academy. So here are 50% brown rabbits, 50% white rabbits. And then over time, that's going to change. The white rabbits get eaten. The brown rabbits are selected for. The white rabbits are selected against. And then you can see that they reproduce. And so over time, the population is going to be more brown rabbits. Right? So the frequency of those genes have changed. The frequency of the alleles of the genes have changed, excuse me. So as we see the more brown rabbits, we know that evolution has occurred. So can you go back? What is evolution? Hopefully you can make sense of what we talked about there, right? But it could be change over time would be like an elementary definition. Differential reproductive success would be a good high school one, right? Those that have the adaptations that make them more fit, survive and reproduce, and they pass those on. And then ultimately that comes from a change in the gene pool. All right. Hopefully you have a good sense of what is evolution. If you're still struggling with that, you come in and see me during the review session and check out that Khan Academy article. Now, what causes that? So you saw the change in the environment. That's obviously going to be a pressure. I showed you a video, the 5 fingers of evolution. So go ahead and pause. Can you remember the 5 forces that can cause evolution? All right. Did you get? We'll start over here with the pinky finger. A small population size that can cause genetic drift. It can cause the founder effect. Right? So I went through the example of basketball statistics. A lot of you all like basketball, and we have Ben Simmons on our wall. Go Sixers! Right? If you just look at one game, that might not represent what their true characteristics as a basketball player are. But if you look at them over a whole season, then you can really see their true free throw statistics and how they play in the games. Same thing here, right? A small sample size of just 4 people. Well, one person just might not reproduce just by chance, or they might be eliminated and you would lose those alleles. So a big population size, a small population size can cause evolution or a change in the gene pool. Ring finger stands for mating. So if you have sexual selection, we use the peacock example in class, right? They're going to cause a change in the gene pool there by their preferences. The middle finger, don't hold it up by itself, but it stands for mutation. You can have a mutation in a gene, and that can cause for selection. And we've seen that with the lactose example. And then the pointer finger stands for immigration and emigration, right? Gene flow, moving between different populations. And then the thumb is an adaptation. So this is natural selection. We had thumbs up for natural selection, thumbs down for adaptations that don't work. That's right from the video that Mr. Anderson put out there for us. All right, so I'm going to breeze through these slides, but these are just some examples of it. So what do we go over in class? Some examples of natural selection. We talked about the pocket mice, how those who are better adapted to the environment were more likely to survive and reproduce. Same thing with the moths. So we did a POGL with that. We looked at the number of moths. And so once that industrial revolution happened in England and it made it dark because of all the pollution. The dark moths were selected for and the white moths were selected against. The finches, we talked about Peter and Rosemary Grant's study, and you saw that one finch came over from the mainland, and then they were to evolve. They adaptively radiated. They went out and to all these different niches, and then they wouldn't get back together, right? We showed that they don't have the same song. They don't like people with different beaks, birds with different beaks. So they became different species. So it was natural selection because there were droughts, and those best suited to the environment were able to survive and reproduce and pass on their genes. And the ice fish, right? And we'll talk about the ice fish a little later. So what's some examples of gene flows? We talked about human migration a little bit. Mutation, the flu virus would be a great example of this. It mutates every year. That's why you need to get a flu shot. Sexual selection, we talked about peacocks. This is from that Berkeley site that's really good. I referenced it once or twice in some of your classwork, and it's Understanding Evolution. So, and it's from a good university dealing with that. And then here is the bottleneck effect, right? The small population. So here you have a bunch of different organisms with genetic diversity. You get squeezed through a bottleneck. Think about like water getting squeezed through the bottleneck of a tube. Just a little bit comes out. Well, only 4 come out here of the bottleneck. So now look, the resulting population as it rebuilds lacks some of that genetic diversity. And so it can be susceptible to disease, etc. If evolution is a change in the gene pool, then you're seeing a change here. All right, and then there's also the founder effect. So it can lead to some syndromes like here, the Amish in Pennsylvania, they founded their new population, and then they bred within this circle, right? And so they're more likely to select for certain features. And so here, this would be the founder effect. Okay, what evidence exists for evolution? You go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to take a quick drink. We're 13 minutes in. Let's keep on rolling. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. We had Coach Luther come in. So real quick for middle school volleyball. All right, what evidence exists for evolution? You shouldn't ever trust something unless you can find evidence for it. Can you remember some of the pieces of evidence? We watched that Stated Clearly video. We didn't watch all of it. I just used it as kind of an intro, and then we did all those activities with whales or cetacean evolution to go over evidence. So here we go. Let's dive in. Do you remember fossils, right? So an organism dies, it gets buried in sediment, and we can get a fossil imprint of it. We briefly, just with a warm-up, went over radiocarbon dating, or how can we tell how old fossils are. From that we saw, right, the first cells have been around since 3.5 billion years ago, a long time. And so we can see a lot of fossils in action. We can see transitional fossils like Archaeopteryx right here. Sorry, my head's covering it up. And that would be the transition between dinosaurs and birds. Oh, here's a better picture. We also did a little work with horse evolution, and that was pretty cool. And it was cool because, like, you often think about evolution as adding things. But instead here we went from multiple toes in the horse to just one, and it was better able to support its weight. And so we practiced with that. And then here's Tiktaalik. And so Tiktaalik, that transitional fossil between fish and amphibians that Neil Schumann and company found. And so they figured out how old or when they thought the transition happened. And so they were able to find those types of rocks, and they were able to find a fossil. Really amazing stuff. Okay, so that was fossils. Now here's anatomy, and we practice with this: homologous structures, analogous structures, and vestigial structures. Can you describe each? Go ahead and pause the video. All right, so homologous structures are going to represent homo means the same, so like some type of common ancestry. So we went over one bone, two bones, humerus, radius, ulna, many bones, your carpals. Well, we have the one bone, two bones, many bones. So do bats, birds, seals, dogs, whales. It shows common ancestry for us, right? Insects don't have that. Sharks don't have that. So that's a homologous structure. An analogous structure are items that, because sharks and whales are both in the ocean, they have similar dorsal fins. They've evolved to that environment. But sharks and whales are very different, right? Sharks have gills. They stay underwater. Whales are mammals. They have to come up and breathe. That's why they have blowholes, and they spit out water and they take in air. I heard that there's some killer whales by SIFA right now. I'm not sure. I just heard that at the staff lounge, but it'd be interesting to check out. All right, and then analogous. So how's that an example of, how is that evidence of evolution for analogous structures? Well, it shows that they've evolved adaptations to be more fit in the same environment. So it shows how evolution works. You might kind of remember that from looking at different pockets of cichlids, etc., or different fish in different lakes evolving structures. All right, vestigial structures. It's something that doesn't have a function in the present day, but is useful to an ancestor. So this was kind of amazing to you. I showed you some whale skeletons, and they have vestigial structures showing that they once had legs. So I got a little quiz for you. What type of structure is this? Hopefully you got homologous. What type of structure is this? Hopefully you got vestigial. How are they different? Homologous, showing common ancestry. Analogous, showing convergent evolution, showing that they both evolved similar adaptations for a similar environment, even though they're not closely related on the tree of life. And here's that analogous part right here. All right, we also have some chemistry, your DNA and RNA. So we're going to do that POGL on phylogenetics. You'll get to compare some DNA sequences for cytochrome C. It's also on the next slide. And so the more closely related species DNA is, it means the more recent common ancestor they've had. If they split apart a long time ago, then there's been more chance for mutations in that DNA. It's pretty cool. This is a tough thing to wrap your head around, but evolution really relies on imperfect replication or imperfect making of offspring, right? If every offspring was identical to the parent, there wouldn't be anything to select amongst between the babies, or between the offspring. So that gets more into it, and we talk about that a lot in AP biology. All right, so here's that cytochrome C comparison. You can see that, right, the cow and the pigeon are 10 and 12 differences from humans, whereas a chimpanzee and the monkey are only 0 or 1, right? So, right, we're still very different from a chimpanzee, but we share more recent common ancestry with the chimpanzee than with a cow or than with a fruit fly. And you can see the number of differences means the further back that they probably separated. Now, these trees are hypotheses, right? We use DNA evidence, we use fossils, we even use some morphological evidence, bodies, traits, like things that are derived or ancestral as well, but we constantly have to revise these trees as we find more information. And I think that's a great example of the scientific process in action. Okay, embryology. So I showed you that Evo Devo song modeled off of Despacito that some of you all liked, some of you all thought was corny. But basically, the more similar embryos showed conservation of genes, these Hox genes. And so it shows that we share a more recent common ancestor. The human and the pig look more similar than the fish and the human. So we generally share a more recent common ancestor. And so this is a whole fascinating subfield called Evo Devo that's really coming along, and you kind of combine that with the modern synthesis, which is genetics and evolution, come together, and it's just really fascinating topics. You can major in that in university now. And then biogeography, I need to do a better lesson on this, right? But when the continents were all together in Pangea, once they separated, you should see those species everywhere, unless they were selected against. Species that arose after Pangea would only be in those endemic area, or those areas where they evolved, but they might be similar. If they're in a similar latitude or climate as another part of the world, maybe they'll evolve similar structures, even though they're different species. So biogeography can be tricky. Maybe check out the Khan Academy article that I'll link in Classroom, but we'll also go over it more in class. And then I didn't mention this in the beginning, but we can see direct observation of evolution in action, right? We have seen a DDT and other insecticides have been sprayed. Like when my dad was a kid, they used to spray it all over picnics. It's just crazy, right? And then you can see that now there's more insects who are resistant to it. So those who had a mutation that helped them survive the insecticide, they're more likely to be around and reproduce. Same thing with that bacterial megaplate that we watched. And so it was increasing concentrations of antibiotics, and the bacteria evolved. Those bacteria with mutations that let them live were able to go on, and they were able to survive and reproduce. And I think this is a really cool tree showing them like these ones died off, these ones died off, these ones came on, and then you can see like which ones made it to the end. And this is pretty scary. I think it was just 10 days or so on this plate. And it's, I did it as the follow-up to the Addie movie. So that was pretty scary there for you to think about. Okay, go ahead and pause the video. Can you describe what changes in a population occur because of evolution? Okay, I'm back. 21 minutes in. Sorry to get a drink of water. So if you're still with me, or if you skipped to this section, that's great. So what changes in a population occur because of evolution? Well, we went over 3 of them: stabilizing selection, disruptive selection, and directional selection. What's important about these, right? They're polygenic. They act upon things that are controlled by many genes, is that it's going to change the population over time. And if 2 populations are geographically isolated, you might get speciation. So let's go over each of these. Stabilizing selection, right? You're selecting for a middle phenotype. The example used in class was human birth weight. Here, I'm going to use, this is from Khan Academy. It's the same example each time with beetle color, but there's different pressures acting upon the beetles. So here, they're selecting for the middle color between light green and dark green. So right here, middle green. Directional selection is what many of you think of when you think of evolution. It's selecting for one extreme phenotype. So for the giraffe, they're selecting for the longer neck. Here, you're selecting for the darker beetle. In the rock pocket mice, it was directional selection, selecting for the darker mice. In the pepper moths, it's directional selection, selecting for the darker moths. Right? And then in the Finch movie, we didn't watch all of it, but we highlighted segments of it. There's directional selection for big beaks. And then that was after the drought. And then rainstorms came, and then there were small seasons. So there's directional selection for small beaks. So that's pretty cool. All right, and then there can be disruptive selection. You're selecting for either extreme phenotype. So you either want to be the dark beetle or the light beetle. That's pretty cool. There's more than this. There's frequency dependent selection and other types, but this is what you need to know for 9th grade bio. All right, we're rolling along. How does evolution explain the unity and diversity of life? So I got really into this lesson. I got really excited, right? Unity and diversity. So unity meaning things we share in common. That's really beautiful. And diversity, things that make us different, which is really beautiful. All right, so what do we share in common with everything? Hopefully you remember the Lucca. And so Lucca, it's a town in Italy I've been to. That's beautiful. Probably the best meal I've ever eaten in my life. And it also stands for the last universal common ancestor. So the last universal common ancestor used DNA or RNA as their genetic code, engaged in cellular respiration and made ATP as energy. They used proteins as enzymes. They had a lipid bilayer membrane to contain the cell, and they used cellular division as a means of reproduction. I do not expect you to memorize this. This is the first time I've taught this course. We're following that pre-AP curriculum where we haven't gone over this stuff, right? I haven't gone over cellular respiration, DNA, proteins, etc., but we will. And so when we do, I'll reference back to the Luca. But these are things that every single thing that's alive today does or uses. All right, so how does it mean that we're different? So, and here's the Luca here. Remember, it doesn't mean that there wasn't life before, but it's the life that gave rise to what we have today. Here's the tree. Remember that trees are hypotheses, and so we think now from the work with Lynn Margulis, with endosymbiosis and other scientists, that there could be a lot more crossing over of branches than we ever thought with horizontal gene transfer. So what does it mean to be different? Why is there so much beauty in the world today? Why are there 8.7 million different species? And are we causing many of them to go extinct as humans, right? Is my generation really doing anything about it? I'm 37 now, and I'm not sure that me and my friends are really helping to correct that. And I don't think that my parents' generation is doing that. I think it's going to really be up to you. And it's going to be, I hope that we can figure that out together. Anyway, let me get off of that soapbox and let's get back to the presentation here. So species is a group of organisms that can interbreed together and produce fertile offspring, right? So that's the really important part. Fertile, their offspring can have babies as well. So this is kind of crazy. This African fish eagle and this bald eagle are different species. They wouldn't breed together, right? And these Great Dane and Chihuahua, I had a Chihuahua for many years, are the same species. They're both dogs. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, let's get into it. What makes for different species? Well, it kind of goes back to ecology, which we started the year with, right? The competitive exclusion principle. No two species can occupy the exact same niche. So if they do, there's going to be a lot of competition. But as more niches open up, then you would have evolution for that new niche. And so, there's going to be those that are most fit for that part of the environment or for predator-prey interactions, and there'll be evolution happening. So how did it become separate? Hopefully you remember. So here's an example with elephants, the African elephant and the Asian elephant. Here's an example with different types of squirrels. And so they had some type of barrier. They had the Grand Canyon here. And so how does it work? They need to be geographically isolated or sympatrically isolated. I'm not going to worry about this for our class. That happens a lot with plants because they can have different numbers of chromosomes. But let's talk about geographical, right? So they get divided into two different areas. And so once they're divided, and I gave you an example of butterflies. We looked it up, biozone. Piece on that. They start undergoing the selection pressures of their different environments. And that can lead to directional selection, stabilizing selection, disruptive selection, etc. But eventually, over a long period of time, or it could be short if they have quick reproductive time periods, they'll become different enough that when they come back together, they won't mate. So we saw that with the lizard clip I showed in class. They know us lizards from HHMI. We saw that with the finch clip. And we can see that with the butterfly example that I gave you. So let me review. I think I'm getting a little lag towards the end of this video. Geographical isolation. Two populations of the same species are separated. Over time, they undergo enough evolution that, let's say that this species, when they get back together, now they won't mate. They don't like each other, or they're just not receptive to each other. What are some ways that they can be pre-zygotic isolation? So before the fertilized egg isolation, they could be geography, could be behavioral with songs, right? They don't like each other's songs. It could be mating time, which is also called temporal, right? They might mate at different times of the day or different times of the year. And they might have physical differences. You can't mate a lion and a butterfly. The lion would eat the butterfly or try to, right? It just wouldn't work. And there's more than that, but that's good enough for here. Post-zygotic, so after the fertilized egg, right? That you might say, well, what if they do come back together? they might make a hybrid between the two species, and that hybrid would be selected against. It's not going to be as strong, or it might be strong like this mule here, but it's unable to have fertile offspring. If the hybrid is strong and is fertile, it might become a new species, or the other species might die out, right? It doesn't have, the tree of life is full of divergence, convergence, etc. Okay, and then we did a little work with the phylogenetic tree. So you should see your study guide for some practice problems on this. Right, what would be the most recent common ancestor of A and B? Well, right here. How about the most recent common ancestor of A and D? Would it be right here at this node? Who's more related, A and E or A and C? Well, hopefully you get A and C because they share a more recent common ancestor here than here. Oh, and look, I just asked those questions. All right, let's make it to the end here. So we did several activities with HHMI along with that NGSS storyline that I thought were really cool. So I encourage you to go check them out. Here's where I get them all from: The Making of the Fittest, these short films, and I try to do the activities with them. I think you enjoyed the ice fish one, the rock pocket mice, etc. I didn't want to just make it a movie class or anything. We, of course, did the justifications. All right, can you explain the big idea of the rock pocket mice movie? So we went over it earlier, but hopefully you saw, right, there's a change in the environment. There was mutations in this MC1R gene that led to dark mice. It wasn't the same mutation each time, which is really interesting, right? It could have been different mutations, but it's still selected for dark fur in different in different lava flows throughout. So therefore, it showed that provided a selective advantage. So it was a really clear-cut example of evolution. All right, so different mutations led to dark fur on different lava flows, but each time the dark fur prevailed. How about the ice fish movie? Do you remember the ice fish? Woo! They sure do look funny, huh? Right, and so we compared that to a cod, and the ice fish had clear blood. Oh my goodness, what's going on there? So what did you get out of it? Hopefully you got that evolution can be both the addition of genes and the loss of genes. They lost the gene for making hemoglobin, and their blood became clear. That made their blood less thick, and it made it able to withstand the colder temperatures. They also gained a gene for making an antifreeze protein. It helps prevent their blood from freezing. The water that they're in is really cold. Salt lowers the freezing point of water. We did that with the styrofoam cups in class, and you had the water freeze and then your antifreeze solution not. So what's the big picture? Their environment changed as Antarctica pulled away from South America, and they're selected for antifreeze, and they lost a gene as well, making hemoglobin. If we lost the gene for making hemoglobin, that'd have catastrophic effects. So here it wasn't selected against. They're able to absorb oxygen through their skin as well. All right, this is a fun clip that we watched, the big idea of the biology of skin color. Why do we have these beautiful different skin colors throughout the world? And can you make a model of it? So I really harped upon this. So hopefully your model has something with UV rays, right? The UV rays, we know they burn us. So we have melanin, or we have different types. We have melanin to protect our DNA so we don't get cancer. But then we looked and we thought about it with skin cancer. When does that usually strike people? Is it before they have children or after they have children? If it's after they have children, would it be a strong selective pressure? So then Dr. Jablonski from Penn State also talked about how this melanin in us protects folic acid, right? A B vitamin. And so that's really important to baby's health, right? And if someone's pregnant, they can take folic acid supplements and neonatal vitamins. So it's not only that it protects against skin cancer, but it also protects folate. So then that begs the question, why aren't we all dark? Why are people in northern latitudes or southern latitudes lighter skin? Well, hopefully you got down that we need to use some of those UVB rays to make vitamin D, right? And up in the northern latitudes, you're going to have less intense UVB rays because of the slope of the earth and amount of sunlight, etc. So you need to have lighter skin to make enough vitamin D. Well, now we're an interconnected world. Look at all of us at this international school here in Oman, right? So you need to, be careful, right? If you're lighter skinned here in Oman, the sun's pretty intense. You could get burned and be at higher risk for skin cancer. Likewise, if you're darker skinned going to school in northern latitude, you might need to take vitamin D supplements. And so this was a pretty cool example here. And then I think this is the last one. Last but not least, the lactose movie. So if you're watching this early, actually I haven't showed it in class yet, but we will today and tomorrow. So why can some people drink milk and others not? Why would we turn off genes, right? And so basically what we're getting at here is that in the past that humans would drink milk, and so as a baby, and then once they were weaned from their mother, they wouldn't drink milk again. But once cattle and goats, etc., were domesticated, that means we were able to shepherd those animals and milk them, etc., we had a new food source available, right? But you've already evolved to turn that gene off. You want to conserve energy. Well, there's mutations happening all the time. And some of those mutations happen in the lactase gene to keep it on. And so those people who had the gene kept on throughout their lives were then able to drink or eat this cattle's milk. And in times of famine and war, etc., they'd be highly selected for. And so it started to spread through the population. So it's kind of amazing how many people are lactose intolerant and who isn't, right? And who knows, maybe you can get that crafty kitchen ice cream. All right, you made it. Whew, that was long. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you skipped to the sections that help you. I hope you go out and play at our wonderful school or go to our beautiful community we live in. I know I'm going to after this. And then that you go back and reflect upon how evolution explains the unity and diversity of life. Take care, students, and good luck on your test.